Welcome to the Next Tier podcast. The Next Tier is a leadership podcast about the people decisions that shape organizations and the moments that define careers. Today, I have the opportunity to introduce Heather Rocker. Since 2023, Heather has served as CEO of Women in Technology, where she has helped create countless opportunities for women and girls to explore, pursue, persist, and lead in technology. Witt's work spans every stage of the career journey, from the classroom to the boardroom. Before Witt, Heather held numerous tech leadership roles with organizations such as Amazon, Drupal Association, and SEI. She is also a graduate of Georgia Tech. Go Jackets. And at the end of the day, I would describe you, Heather, as a tech exec and lifelong philanthropist. In the last year alone, you've been recognized as one of Georgia's most influential leaders, one of Atlanta's most powerful leaders, a Titan 100, and Georgia Tech's 2026 Pathway of Progress honoree. It's quite the impressive list. And I will say this, Heather, it's not bragging if it's true.
I love it.
I love it too. It's really, really awesome. So you and I have known each other through WIT and also through our CEO, Betsy Robinson.
Right.
For listeners meeting you for the first time, what should they know about Heather Rocker beyond the titles?
That's a big question, right? So it's like you read all the accolades and the LinkedIn profiles, and it's also curated. But I think at the end of the day, I'm just a member of the Atlanta tech community that wants to see good things happen for everybody that's involved. And I think I've always kind of geared myself toward leadership positions. I'll go through phases where I burn out and I'm like, I don't want to be in charge of anything. And then I go do that and I'm like, nope, I need to be in charge of things. This doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
It was funny. I was thinking about the fact that, I'm an engineer by education, but I was also a dancer starting at the age of 3. So there's as much of me that's creative as there is analytical, but all of me, but even as a dancer, I became a dance teacher when I was 12 and started doing that. So I've always loved to pour into people and lead and do things. I should have known I was going to go into some kind of community leadership when in elementary school, I gathered all of the children in our neighborhood and I taught them choreography to a mixtape that I had. And we created a show. And I don't know that I ever asked them if they wanted to do it. I just made them do it. And then I created tickets and we made our parents pay to come watch us. So I guess my roots of being creative and being a leader, but also knowing how to raise money started early.
Was that recorded off of radio and
Oh, yeah.
dubbed?
I'm a child of the 80s. We were, recording off the radio and then creating our own mixes. Yeah.
So who influenced you early?
So it's interesting. One of the reasons I'm so passionate about getting girls interested in STEM is there was really none of that. So I didn't have there's these programs and they're going to show you all these things to do and here's all the opportunities. So I think where I was influenced was probably in school. Any teacher that encouraged me, that said, you're good at math and science, you should take the harder class, you should take the AP class, all those things mattered, I think a great deal. And then when it came to, really being influenced about what to do, I think it was more of trial and error about what I didn't like than having a really clear path of what to do. So the influence that I didn't have, I try to pour back into other people because I think, most of us didn't grow up with try these careers before you even go to college and see what you like to do and what are you good at. And here's all the ways that you can make money that might also feed what's best about your personality. The fact that students have that now, I think is huge.
Yeah, and I would also say I think your creativity probably helped your understanding of technology and maybe simplified it more. And earlier on, probably weren't aware of that. Probably wasn't an influence, but now it's a reality.
I think so. I think the smartest engineers and scientists and technologists I know have some kind of artistic piece to their personality.
Yeah.
And that really helps them. I think it also helps with being able to not only, I think it makes you a strong thinker, but I think the creative piece of problem solving and how things work and also just how to relate to people.
Yeah, I think that's the curiosity component. I think that's become a skill now that is must have in any organization for success from a professional perspective. So I think those things absolutely go in tandem. Look, we've discussed how you've coached women to resist the reflex to deflect minimize and immediately hand credit to everyone else in the room. As a girl dad, I have a daughter who I see struggle with self confidence at a preteen, teenage age. And I would tell you that it's really concerning for me. So, did you always see yourself as an advocate for equality, a technologist, or as a business leader who happens to do both?
So I don't know that I ever saw myself and labeled it and knew exactly what I was doing. I think like most people, I didn't grow up and I'm like, "Oh, I'm so confident. I know exactly what I want to do and I'm fully skilled to get
Hmm.
there." Like, that wasn't at all what happened, and I think it was I see in other people what they're so good at and what they're so strong at, and I want to pull it out of them and make them realize what they're capable of. And then if you're lucky, people do that to you too. So I think any opportunity to do that, but as far as, like, where I saw myself, I just saw problems that could be solved, and if those problems involved people, even better. And so it really, and that's why half my career is corporate and half is nonprofit. It's not that
Right.
I have to live in one world or the other. In fact, I get pulled into things that I don't even know that I'm ready to do. Somebody sees in me, "You can do this." But it's if there's a problem I can solve, if there's, something I can make better than how I found it, that's what I wanna do. And if there's some kind of mission element to it, then
Yeah.
that makes me the happiest.
Was there a moment specifically that you can reflect back on that you realized you had this ability to, I'll say, influence and advocate or have others advocate for themselves? Like you just said, you see potential in people. So, was there a moment in your journey where you were like, this is the path?
It's interesting. I think I learned to do that most in volunteer roles before
Mm,
I ever did it in professional roles.
interesting.
And so if you think about it, most people, I don't know anybody who gets everything that they need out of their job and gets to pour every talent that they have into that job. It's just not going to happen on a regular basis. So I often talk to people based on my experience that you can find volunteer roles that are using the parts of you that you don't get to use in your day-to-day paid career. And I think that really helps to round people out. And so I had a really cool journey early on volunteering as soon as like high school age
Hmm.
and getting involved in some meaty volunteer roles and working with people. And one of my first leadership volunteer roles when I was in my late teens, early 20s was working with high school girls. It was a scholarship program. And so I got to work with those girls and help them learn how to like do their first interviews and talk about themselves and cultivate their talent and think about what they want to be and what they want to do.
Hmm.
And I think I just realized I love seeing what they end up doing. Like that really made me happy. I learned more about managing people being in volunteer roles than I ever thought I would, and that skill set has served me very well. I remember interviewing for my first nonprofit executive role, and one of the questions was, "Well, can you work with volunteers? They don't get paid by you, so they're gonna listen to you or not." And somebody in the room, had looked at my resume and said, "Yeah, she's been president of the junior league. She's dealt with everything. She's got this." So I was like, "It's not wrong." You learn a lot. And I was mentioning at a workshop I was running this morning, we were talking about the fact that if you can learn the skill set of inspiring and building a coalition of people that don't have to be there, that aren't tied to a paycheck, if you can do that, it's so much easier to parlay that into the people that do have to be there.
Yeah, they will give you their time and talent. And that's what when we're looking at volunteerism, those are the two things that are critical.
Absolutely, and people don't have unlimited amounts of either one,
Right.
right? So you've gotta I think that's where I learned and I didn't know I was learning any of it along the way, right? You don't know until you look back and go, "Oh, that's where I cultivated that skill set."
Yeah.
But if you can really make people be inspired about the mission and wanna put time in,
Mhm.
and it's their extra time, right? Whatever extra time is for somebody, then it's like you learn I think it's communication skills and coalition building skills and all those important things you can use almost anywhere.
Well, and I think you said it's an innate ability to know how to get people in the right seats, even if it is strategic volunteering or
Right.
philanthropy. Like you have to get the right person in the right seat to leverage that talent. And sometimes they don't know what that talent is because it's hidden. And
Exactly.
it's up to us as leaders to pull that out of them.
They don't know how to say, "Here's what I can bring to the table," and where to put it, right? And
Mhm.
so I think it's huge. I think the other piece is that it really, I think if you can learn to, every nonprofit, every volunteer role is kind of based on a problem you're trying to solve.
Mm.
So the mission is based on something that needs to be better or be fixed.
Right.
And so you learn how to take a challenge statement and get people excited and rallied around that, and that we're going to go fix that. And I think I've used it as much in nonprofit, but I've also used it in corporate. It's the same thing, right? It's just like, here's the challenge we're trying to solve. Let's get people rallied around the problem, and then let's talk about how we're going to use everybody's best talents to get that done.
Yeah, and I think that goes hand in hand with technology. When we look at how we're trying to solve problems with technology, we have clearly defined use cases. And so then we work towards fulfilling what those use cases are. And then do we solve that with a build, buy, or a process change? So I think that's a great shift into wanted to talk a little bit about technology because I know that's your
I
background
mean,
and
it's in the title of my
it is
job.
in the title of your job. So, what do you think right now is different about leading technology today versus 5 years ago?
Well, 5 years ago, nobody knew what generative AI
Right.
was. And so we're in a space and a place. So it's interesting. So immediately before I came here, like you mentioned, I was at Amazon. I was on
Hmm.
the Alexa AI team.
Yep.
That was an opportunity I got pulled into that I never knew how that background was going to feed what I'm doing the moment we're in now. So I was there at a time where conversational AI,
Mhm.
Siri and Alexa and all those things was getting more and more sophisticated. But being there when the shift happened to generative AI was huge. And it was just a massive, like, okay, everybody pivot. This is where we're going. And the
Yeah.
opportunity for what it can accomplish is so big. But I think it's like you're in the industrial revolution if it was moving at the speed of light,
Hmm.
right? And so it's the pace of the technology now. It's how much it infiltrates everything we do.
Hmm.
And I think the biggest thing is people are trying to learn how to use a technology before they completely understand it, before they know the business case, before they think about risk, and before they think about governance.
Yeah.
And then they back into all those things, which is not the right way to do it, but it's like you're trying to keep up with everybody, right? And so I think it's an interesting time. We talk a lot about how women in particular have to spend the time and energy to learn AI.
Hmm.
Like, you've gotta get this is
You have to
not a
hone it.
fad.
Yeah.
This is not going away. This is not a flash in the pan kinda thing. Like, this is here. It's changing everything. Companies aren't gonna sit you down and say, "Okay, everybody that wants to learn about AI, here's a workshop, and we're gonna handhold you and tell you everything." Look, you've got to just figure it out.
Right.
You gotta dig in and do it because everybody, I think the big conversation I'm sure you've heard a lot too is that AI is gonna take your job, and the common consensus is it's more likely that someone who knows how to utilize AI is gonna take your job.
Yeah. I say, I'll teach you, you show me, now you teach others.
Right.
Is we can go back to December of 2022, pre Chat GPT and now post Chat GPT. And I think to your point in AI literacy, most of the common folks in our society, when they think about AI, they're thinking about generative AI. And I think if we go back over the last couple of years, like 2023, 2024, to your point, and okay, now we were doing conversational AI, generative AI, now this adaptive cognitive AI that's
Right.
happening and the evolution of that that's happened in the last 18 months. To your point, it's at the speed of light.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
And again, like, I feel like when I talk to somebody, and this isn't just women, this is anybody who
Mm.
isn't in a position where they're having to use it, or they're some people are resistant to it, right? Because we've seen a lot of things come and go. They hear a lot of negative things, which there's a lot, there's
Mhm.
a lot that we could be doing to be more responsible around
Yes,
AI, and that we could do
absolutely.
a whole session on that. But it's like, we don't have the luxury of not figuring it out. And I think the more good people that are involved in utilizing AI, getting more educated, building that prowess around it,
Hmm.
are going to help us build better systems, better guardrails, better policy.
Right.
And that's what we need. We need
Yeah.
everybody in, even if you're resistant to it or you see it as an existential threat. Okay, great. Let's talk about how we don't let that happen. We need everybody on deck to make sure that responsible AI is the way we go.
Yep.
And then you mentioned like your child, like I've got a child too, right? So then you think about the fact that our children are digital natives,
Right.
but now they're in the AI world
Right.
being digital natives,
Yeah.
right? And so what does that mean for the way they learn
Hmm.
and what they should and should not do? And what are those conversations we need to have with them, just like we have internet safety conversations?
Right.
what are the AI reality conversations we need to have? And by the way, AI's not always smart, so don't take it for face value
That's
and
right.
turn it in as your thought because it might be wrong
Right.
depending on what it's pulling. So I think it's like us learning it at the same time we need to be training our children how to deal with it.
Are you seeing more resistance in that literacy component in a younger demographic or an older demographic? I'm curious if there's any correlation
Interesting. I
there.
think it's less about age or generation and it's more about what they're already exposed to. So, those
Okay.
of us who are already heavily into technology,
Mhm.
it's a little bit of a second nature. If you're curious about technology by design, you're like, ooh, it's a new thing. Let me go kind of figure this out. If you're wary of technology or, with good reason, kind of thinking about, well, what negative impact could this have? You're going to be generally resistant. And I think, that if you're older, it could be, well, I just figured out how to use this darn smartphone. Now I've got to figure out why it sounds like my grandchild's calling me and it's an AI bot that's gotten so sophisticated that
Yeah.
scams I can't even, negotiate at this point.
Mhm.
So there's that, but then there's younger folks that I think in a good way are asking, well, what does this mean? And where should I use this and where should I not? And what does this mean environmentally? What does it mean from a workforce perspective? And again, I think we can challenge the downside to AI with still being plugged in about what the upsides are. Because,
Mhm.
and I'll mention too, like one of the things, even back when I was just dealing with conversational AI, the two biggest users with Alexa that we saw were senior citizens and in the summer were children.
Yeah. Playing music.
So the common denominator was they were lonely and they wanted somebody to talk to. So senior citizens were using the Siris and the Alexas to have a conversation. And then kids were bored in the summer and just wanted to chat and learn things and talk about things. And so if you take that and then say, okay, so maybe there are things we can solve through this kind of technology.
Mhm.
I think what I'm so excited about with AI is how could we solve some of these societal problems using AI tools? Like, how can we help children who have all different learning styles? Whether it's, a visual learner, I'm an auditory learner, whatever
Mhm.
that is, let's customize things to each individual
Practical.
child. And then for senior citizens, is there a way that, like, if they're living at home without any help, how can AI kind of help be a little bit of an in home assistant beyond what we've had before? So I think there's a lot of great applications, and the people that are skeptical about AI,
Yeah.
if they were to dig into it, are probably the best problem solvers and creators of solution to really
Mhm.
make it do some great things.
Oh, that's a great point. Wanted to ask you one question about organizational adoption. I think this is really important. You have a really interesting perspective because you interact with a lot of different organizations across multiple verticals, and you get a good feel for what companies are doing to innovate. So I'm curious what you think is the biggest mistake companies are making right now when they say they want to be digital first.
So it's interesting. I think that one of the common mistakes is what do you even mean by that? Like, is it a buzzword that you heard and you
Hmm.
went to a conference, everybody's talking about it,
Yeah.
you bring it back and you're like, we're going to be digital first. What does that mean? I'm not exactly sure. Y'all
Update our website.
go figure it out. But I think everything is, what does that mean to us? But also, what does that structure, what does that do for us? Who are the decision makers when we're talking about digital first? And what is, are we putting in are we putting in opportunities and innovations that drive our business or are
Mhm.
we just trying to like check a box? And so what I see most is the companies that are stopping and thinking, how does this fit into our business model? How does it drive some of our organizational goals? How does this make us work smarter, not harder? And then what does this mean from a legal perspective? I think about it from like a nonprofit perspective. Any of us that use, donor data, right? And so you've got personally identifiable information. Healthcare sector, this is
Yeah,
huge, right? There's
PHI,
things
PII.
there's things you can load into the cloud and there's things you absolutely can't. And so you've got to be thinking about, where does data go? Do I have the governance that's going to help with all these new emerging
Mhm.
technologies? Who's making those decisions? It's interesting. I was in a conversation yesterday where one of the big things that's coming up is if something goes wrong, who's accountable?
Yeah.
And are you stopping to have those conversations first?
Mm,
So it's like aligning what that means to you.
mm.
Do we have the infrastructure to do this? What do we need to be successful? And then what are those guardrails and who's got authority and accountability for anything that we're trying to put into place?
I love it. If something goes wrong, who's accountable? I
I mean,
think
if you think
that's
about it with AI, like
right.
if something were to go really wrong with an AI system that you've got in place,
Yeah,
who is accountable?
right.
And it's interesting.
Are we blaming the bot?
Well, I bet if most folks look at their vendor contracts, that's not going to work,
No,
right? So you've got to also think through like,
right.
who's accountable on paper and who's accountable in reality,
Yeah.
and are we making assumptions
Oh.
versus really understanding that?
So, I will say this, a couple things that I've learned through our journey is it begins and ends with data. Your data's gotta be good. If you've got bad data, you're gonna have bad intelligence.
Right.
That's something I've learned in the last couple of years. And then over the last couple of months, I've had this clarity on change adoption and change management, and I've realized that our people aren't resisting change; they're surviving complexity. And I think as leaders, one of the things, to your point, that we've maybe gotten wrong is we've overcomplicated systems or process. And the more simple it is, the better utilization and adoption is.
Absolutely. Because and I think that's a measurement when people are looking at AI
Mm.
and new technology is like, not only what's the ROI, what's the adoption rate,
Yeah.
right? And to your point, I've seen organizations just layer in, layer in, layer in,
Hmm.
right? Without thinking, is there something we should get rid of that we can
Yeah.
do at the same time? Or as your point, it's not that we mind the change, it's that you've just added 8 things on top of the 20 things,
Yeah.
and we weren't using 15 of the 20
No.
things to start with.
No. No.
Yeah,
They're already underutilized.
right.
No. Let's shift to women in technology. You encourage women in technology that their wins are data points that prove what's possible. That stability matters not for ego, but because others need to see themselves reflected in the stories of women who succeed. What progress have you seen, and where do we still have work to do?
So I think, the progress is the visibility piece, right? So Artemis 2,
Yeah.
a woman on the flight crew,
Yeah.
right?
Oh,
Huge for visibility.
hmm.
The diversity in that shuttle, right? So it's like just people being able to see themselves in places that are just really powerful. That matters. And I think we're doing better earlier in education with, helping young people understand here are different things you can do and you can be, and here's people that do those. I think that's great. Where we haven't been as careful is like we think about all these STEM feeder programs and let's get them all excited, let's get them excited. And then we lose once they get into their careers, we're kind of not thinking about that. And so what happens to somebody whose early career, who were they looking for? Do they see themselves in the leadership of their own organizations?
Hmm.
So I think visibility is huge. And if you don't see it in your organization, I love about things like LinkedIn and podcasts and places where people can express themselves and have
Hmm.
visibility and communication is because it is so accessible
Yeah.
and you can control more of like the message you're putting out and your branding and your visibility. You're not dependent on somebody doing that for you.
Yeah.
So I think that's huge. And I think more and more people need to utilize those opportunities to do it. And it's interesting. I fully encourage women in tech to do that. I am still pushing myself to do it more too.
Right.
So there's not it is uncomfortable a little bit, right?
Hmm.
So it's like, but we're gonna do it together.
Hmm.
And then when more of us do it, the more comfortable it gets.
Yeah, having a platform, it's baked in, to your point, in LinkedIn. Like, we have a platform. It's free. Anyone has a voice, an equal voice on the platform. But it's about finding their perspective. And I think a lot of us struggle with that. And I know women in particularly do, is what is my voice, and how do I amplify that? I think a lot of the work that you do in encouraging and the coaching and the counseling that goes into that eliminates some of the, probably the restrictions that they have in place, the walls that are up. What advice would you give to somebody who, you kind of alluded to, if they're looking in their organization and they have aspirations to be in a C-suite? What advice would you give them?
So I think the first thing is why. So I want to debunk this idea that you have to be in the C suite to be successful. I don't think there's one career path. I don't think there's one, you have to journey to a title. And if you don't get that title, you're not a success. There are only so many C suite spots. There's only so many board spots. There's
Right.
only so many executive roles. So by default, if everybody has to reach that to be successful, we've already set people up for feeling like
Mm.
failures. So it's what is it that you want to accomplish? And then what does that look and feel like? Because it may be an executive role, it may not, right? And it's also timing. So I think it's meeting people. I will say, I've learned so much from WIT community members that I get to hear their stories and their journeys. And I think at the beginning, I mentioned I've learned more about what I don't want to do along the way to know kind of steer away from that versus into something else. I think hearing, yeah, it looks great on paper, but here's the reality. Are you ready for this lack of, controlling your schedule and you
Yeah.
won't have this flexibility you think you will? Are you ready for what comes with it? Do you understand what that means? And if you are, great. If go for it and that understand what it takes to get there.
Mhm.
So I think it's two pieces. I think it's being able to clearly articulate what you want and why, because only then can people help you along the way. And then put yourself in places where you can learn from women who have been there, done that. And that's what I am passionate about at WIT. I'm so lucky that we have so many executive women in technology roles that what they want most to do is to pour back into our community, into early career, into mid career. And so I try to always cultivate spaces where you have the opportunity to learn from someone else. And so our early career can learn from mid career, our mid career can learn from executive, and we have all those opportunities. And I think it's building authentic relationships, learning what worked and what didn't, and then being able to course correct along the way.
Yeah, you're building I'll say like an ecosystem
Absolutely.
that grows from each other.
And it's not the same as reading a book or going to a workshop or, seeing a
Mm.
master class online, right? It's like, no, this is legit. And everybody has a different story and a different path. And I think you'll find somebody that's like, oh, there are different ways to do this and different ways to get there. And not everybody has to look like that or start like that
Yeah.
or have that, so I think it's the more of the different stories you hear, the better. What I hear the most that I think is so important. So again, trying to debunk this idea that everybody's got to go up a certain ladder a certain way. I think what we're talking about a lot now is the lattice versus the ladder. And so this idea that, going across, learning cross-functional things versus just going up actually makes for more robust experiences both for the employee and the employer.
Yeah.
And so gaining experiences in different ways doesn't just mean, going up the ladder.
A widening of your skill set.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
that's really
And
cool.
so we had a panel recently where some of our women were saying, they did not have a linear path, but sometimes when there wasn't an opportunity to move up, there was an opportunity to move over into a different department, into a different project, into a different skill set, and they took advantage of that. And then they had another tool in their tool belt. And then they did it again and did it again. And once you've got those tools in your tool belt, then you're really well positioned. If you do want to start moving up, you've got a lot behind you to make that happen.
Yeah, I think that tells me that you're coaching and counseling them to make themselves valuable.
Right.
You make yourself valuable by expanding your knowledge within the organization and your capabilities to talk across multiple verticals or even silos within those organizations because you've sat in different departments and you've built relationships in different departments and you know who to go to solve those questions or answer those questions, I guess.
Absolutely. And then I think about as someone who does run a business and whether that's nonprofit or corporate, it's kind of the same
Right.
end game, right? And my favorite kind of employee is somebody who's really curious. I'm like, give me somebody curious all day long. I can teach them the skills and the tactical but it's the curiosity that you can't cultivate. It has to be there. And so I think when people are curious and they raise their hand to go do the thing they haven't done before,
Hmm.
I think that's such a powerful skill set to
Hmm.
have.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. For a long time, we were measured on IQ, then EQ became a real thing, emotional intelligence, and now it's adaptability intelligence. And
Right.
I think that goes hand in hand with curiosity. I wanted to ask you one more question about mentorship because I think it's extremely important. And I'd love to understand why should women and allies consider sponsorship over mentorship? What is the difference between the two?
This is one of my favorite topics right now. I'm so passionate about this conversation and it's huge. So, the reason I started leaning into the idea of sponsorship and really talking about this more is that we look at data around what is causing women to leave technology careers. And one of the key factors to keep them is sponsorship. We always thought it was mentorship. Like mentorship is big in different places and you need to have it. You need to have different kinds of mentors. You need them all during your life in all different ways. You need mentors that challenge you as much as they support you. So that's still really big. Mentorship, though, is somewhat quiet and behind the scenes. And I look at mentorship as I'm giving you advice on what to do. Sponsorship is so powerful. Sponsorship is visible, sponsorship is active. And so if you've got somebody in your organization sponsoring you, that means they're advocating for you whether you're in the room or not.
Mm.
They're helping your name come up when opportunities arise. That's the powerful difference maker.
Mhm.
So it's like, finding a sponsor within your organization. And if you hear success stories, and this is gender neutral, but you'll hear success stories, somebody almost always have somebody that vouched for them,
Yeah.
that pulled them into an opportunity, that advocated for them for that role. And that's a game changer for them.
Who was that person for you?
So it's interesting. As I said, I've gotten pulled into things the second half of my career.
Mhm.
So I'm going to give the example of an executive recruiter.
Okay.
And this is also an example of build relationships with everybody you can along the way and don't discount somebody's role because you never know. You
Right.
never know. So I had the opportunity. I've been, every now and then somebody will reach out and say, hey, I think you'd be great fit
Mhm.
for this, that, or the other, right? Sometimes I pay attention, sometimes I don't. This was one where she reached out. It was something that sounded interesting. She and I talked. We built a very authentic relationship. We clicked, right? I was like, I like her. She's so supportive. And I thought she was great. And so we just kind of kept in touch. So she put me in for a role, and it was to be the CEO of a nonprofit that was focused on responsible AI.
Okay.
And I got all the way to the board interviews. So
Mhm.
I was like one of two candidates at the point, and I did not get that job, mostly because at that point I had not been in AI at all. And there was an internal candidate that had, and it just made more sense.
Sure.
But what was interesting was one of the board members in that interview reached out to her and said, I think she'd be great for something on my team. What do you think? And because she and I had spent time together and we had a real relationship and she believed in me, she said, you know what? I think she'd be great at this, that, and the other. I think you should totally reach out to her. And she just sung my praises for me,
Sure.
right? So she was a huge advocate for
Yeah.
me. So it wasn't that she was in my organization and pulled me up, but she was that advocate in the moment that I wasn't in the room.
Right.
Right. So she was the sponsor saying that, yes, this is a good choice. You should pursue this. And this happened to be a vice president at Amazon Alexa. And that's
Mhm.
how I ended up getting into that role.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah,
Yeah, she was your champion.
she really was. And I still keep in touch with her.
Wow.
I'm not looking like I don't need her, but I don't think that's the point. The
Yeah.
point was I built an authentic relationship
Mhm.
with her, and I would want to help her as much as she would want to help me. And I think that's probably the most underrated professional development skill that we have.
Yeah, it's a great story and really relevant to our industry, of course. And I think it's one of the things for me, Heather, that's kept me going. And it is we do change people's lives. Yes, we get paid to do that, but it's a skill. And we talk about in recruiting all the time. Recruiters will put themselves down and say it's not rocket science, but in a way, it's almost just as difficult
There's
because
an art to it.
we have to build that rapport. We have to find that commonality, and when we do, then we can create influence and advocate on our candidates.
You can't be in your business and not care about people.
Yeah.
And what I think is so fascinating was she cared as much about me as she cared about her relationship with the board member. She wasn't doing business with either one of us.
Yeah.
But do we all like now, but we would all help each other with anything, right? Because it just was very genuine. So I think the best recruiters are just really good people who want everybody to be happy with the end result.
Yeah, and to your point, are curious.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Like she wanted to know me beyond just like what she technically had to get done that
Right.
day.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
that's what it matters.
It does.
And it's a great lead into what we say here all the time at Tier 4 Group, and that's, we talk a lot about being uncommon on purpose. When you hear that phrase, what does it mean to you as a leader?
Uncommon on purpose. So when I think about that, which greatest tagline, right? Like so cool if you do
Mhm.
say so yourself. So to me, the uncommon piece is I'm not trying to do it like everybody else. It's not a rubber stamp. It's not a copy paste. It's not, we've always done it this way. Let's do it that way again. This is what our peers are doing. We're just going to recreate the wheel. My team would tell you and either find it exciting or lament that one of the biggest things that I always say is like, why are we doing it that way? Why are we doing it that way? Well, that's what we did last year. I don't care about last year. I'm in this year. This year's mission, this year's goals, how's it serving? It's not, then let's don't do it that way ever again. Every moment is an opportunity to iterate,
Mm.
right? So, it's like, don't do the easy way. Don't do the common way. Do what's right in the moment. Be
Mhm.
strategic and think. And I think the on purpose really resonates with me,
Mhm.
which is everything that I want to do, everything I want my team to do. I think most leaders, you want it to be with purpose toward the goal. And what that means for us at Women in Technology is anything we're doing has to go through the lens of our mission and our strategic plan. So anything that comes up when somebody's like, I have a great idea, let's do this. And it's like, time out. How does it feed the mission? And how does it feed the strategic plan? And if you can't make that a crystal clear case, it's not, should not be anything on our radar.
Yeah. If it's not in the mission, vision, values, it doesn't suit where we're heading, the direction
Right.
that we're
Where's it
going.
taking us that
Mm.
we need to go? And what does that mean to us? And then there's the short term and the long term. And so sometimes they're very easy short term wins where it just makes sense. And sometimes it may not be as obvious, but good leaders can see this isn't a tomorrow solution, but it is a 5 years from now.
Right.
It sets us on the right path.
You said something. It's one of my favorite things I say, and probably get some eye rolls from some of the folks who've heard me say this a ton. But we like to say we repeat what works and
Yeah.
we iterate what doesn't. And to your point, it's we're constantly trying to get better. And the on purpose part of that is intentionality. Everything we do is intentional and it's for the best interest of our candidates, our clients, our people internally. And so I think you know us very well, clearly by how you defined that and broke that down. What do you think you do differently than most executives intentionally that maybe has contributed to your success?
It's interesting. I don't know that if I look at executives broadly, I don't know that I do anything completely different. I think everybody has different styles. I
Mhm.
think if I look at being a leader in the nonprofit sector in particular, think having an engineering brain, a community heart, and a nonprofit expertise background really makes me probably move a little bit differently. So, for example, one of the workshops I was doing this morning, I was talking about with strategic volunteering, and I was helping both nonprofit leaders and corporate professionals who are leaders in Atlanta's community think about if you're going to spend your time with your community service, how are you doing it very intentionally? How is it not only giving back to the community, but how's it building where you want to go and what you want to do?
Yeah.
Is it the best use of your time? And, are you getting out of it what you need to? And are you putting in what you need to? And the structure I put together is very much an engineering kind of focused framework.
Yeah.
I break it down into an action plan
Hmm.
with a worksheet and with a methodology behind it. And so I think what I try to do is say, regardless of the problem we're trying to solve, there's a framework and a process. And I really always try to come back to effectiveness and efficiency, especially for somebody like us, where you're a small nonprofit, you don't have a ton of staff, you've got to get big things done. So you've got to be really efficient, but you also have to be really effective because if I think about the time that our volunteers put in and the money that our donors put in, I could not sleep at night if I felt like I wasn't the best steward possible of that time and
Yeah.
money. And so I want to make sure that everything we're doing is really, really efficient. We owe it to the people that we're serving. So I think, what I think makes me a little different is I'm approaching things from a very heart forward perspective, but then I put my very kind of like analytical process lens on everything to make sure it makes sense.
Sure. I have some follow up questions to that. I'm curious, how do you run a meeting?
How do I run a meeting?
Yeah.
So it's interesting. Let me tell you, I am trying to run less meetings and I'm trying to have staff run more
Yeah.
because I think it's an important skill set that if your executive is the only one that runs a meeting, the only one that's talking, the only one driving discussion and decision making, I don't think you're getting the best out of your teams.
Yeah.
So I would rather empower somebody to learn that skill set, to get more comfortable with it,
Hmm.
to learn the facilitation. Now, you better bet that we've had a conversation ahead of time. There's an agenda. Everybody's put stuff in it ahead of time. I go in and organize what do we need to tackle today? What
Hmm.
time do we want to spend on what in the background before we get there? But I try very much not to be the only one who's kind of running everything all the time. Now, as I say this, my team is laughing because they'll be like, Heather said she's not going to talk much in this meeting. And then she talked like
It's
a
so
lot.
hard. It's
And
so
then
hard.
I just can't help but like I just have that instinct of like I have to jump in here. I just want to help,
Yeah.
right? But I do think it's an important skill for leaders in all businesses, regardless of sector. You owe it to your teams to develop them and give if they you don't ever give them an opportunity to be in those positions and to learn those skill sets, when will they ever get them?
Yeah, I think it's a great point because there's so many times where when I'm listening to a meeting that our team is running, the observations that I pick up, things that I learn, and areas where we can either have improvement or we're doing things really right is way more evident when I'm not running it and I'm
And
just
you can see how
listening.
it's going and you listen.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you something a little bit unconventional I've done as a nonprofit leader. So for my big volunteer committee meetings, I have assigned a project manager to all of those volunteer teams, a
Okay.
volunteer project manager. And it's someone who does project management as a job. So they are skilled in that. And the reason I think that's so important is they get to come in and they know how to build out the project plan with timelines and ownership and
Yeah, it's a
accountability
talent they
and
already have.
progress. And they come in. So I'll tell you, I've got one for WIT Connect. I've got one for WIT Awards. We're building it out for our other program areas.
Mhm.
I don't run those meetings.
Yeah.
I sit in as a guest and an attendee.
They run them.
The volunteer project manager runs it. And it's the best thing you can do because they run it efficiently like any other project management meeting in any other business. You get more done, you stay on task. And it's actually a blessing to my team who's already overwhelmed with trying to get everything else done. There's somebody that knows how to keep that structure rolling.
Yeah.
And I invite my team members to come and sit and listen. And I tell them, I want you to run your other volunteer meetings just like this. I want them to be that efficient and effective.
Yeah, if
And
it
that
works,
structure.
repeat it, right?
Right,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Oh, that's really good. How do you hire?
How do I hire? Do so I would say half relationship hiring.
Mm,
Like it's really like who do you know? I,
mhm,
I am one of those leaders that when I've worked with somebody or I know somebody and what they bring to the table and I'm in a leadership role,
mm,
I'll try to bring them in with me.
yeah.
Um, Lacey Facer, who works for WIT, is an example of that. She and I worked together before.
Mm,
And so when I got into the CEO role at WIT, she called me and she was like, hey, if you would ever want me to come back and do that with you again, I would. And we just had such a good working
yeah.
relationship. She's just like my right hand person.
Yeah.
And so to bring her back in made my life so much easier.
Mhm,
But I knew what I was getting. And I also knew it was a stretch opportunity for her, right? So I moved her into a COO role, which was a
mhm.
little bit different, a little bit broader,
Yep.
because I didn't want it to be boring to her either. But I try to find people that I know what skill sets they bring to the table and pull them in. I also trust. I trust people I know to make
Sure.
recommendations. I think that's the biggest thing. If somebody can advocate for somebody else, I think it's huge.
Yeah, your network is your net worth, right?
Absolutely.
No, that's really good. And I think this goes hand in hand with the next question is how do you build culture?
How do I build culture?
Mhm,
Well, I'll say I think culture for me, especially in what I'm doing right now, is really based on our mission, right? So from a culture perspective, you have to care about the people we serve. You have to want to make a difference. You have to want to make an impact. If you don't, this is not going to be the right role for you. So I think, the biggest thing you can do for your teams, especially if you're mission serving, even like recruiters, like understanding who you're serving regardless of your role. Everybody on the team needs to understand who you're serving, what they need, what they want, what's going to make them more successful. And I think that makes your job better, whether you're, running finance
mhm.
or directly, program facing, right? I think the culture I hope we build is because our people are entrenched in what our community needs and they learn more and more about it.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point when we think about establishing culture and leaders can try, but the teams ultimately are what defines the
They
culture.
decide what's going to
Yeah.
happen. And I think, one of my biggest things is I never want to be a leader that's going to point fingers and tell everybody else what to do and not be a visible example of doing it. So, I'm not going to be too important to help arrange name tags or pick up trash after an
No,
event
do it
or
all.
print whatever. You do all of it. And I think because of how I function, I'm always drawn to team members that can be a little bit of the Swiss Army knife. If somebody says to me, that's not my job, they probably should start looking the day after
Yeah.
because that's like my least favorite thing to ever hear. I'm like, I don't have the luxury of saying that's not my job. I don't think
No,
anybody on a team should ever say that's not my job. I think
that's
it's
right.
let's figure out how to get that done. Here's maybe what I can and can't bring to the table to be effective with that.
Right.
But that's not my job. Like those rigid boundaries, especially on a small team, like, that's
Yeah.
just not going to work.
Yeah, no, it doesn't work. And it's funny when you said that, it made me think about when we have events here in the office and we've got a committee, they do a great job, our happiness committee of getting
I love it.
everything.
The happiness
Yeah. The
committee.
happiness committee, they get everything together. But then it's always either in the morning or during lunch. And then, we go back to work. And I always try to take time to make sure that I I help clean up. I'm not the best cleaner, Heather, but I can pick stuff up and throw stuff away. And to your point, like I'm not below that. That there's no ground for me to say I can't wipe some icing off of the
Right.
table
And I
from the
think
birthday cake.
And I think that's I mean, when we talk about culture, I think that's the most important thing is we're all willing to jump in where we need
Right.
to make it happen the way it needs to
Yeah.
happen.
All hands on deck.
And we're lucky because that might be a day of volunteer. In your case, the happiness committee, where that's, a role that they've signed up for.
Yeah.
But also like board members who like, where do you need me? How can I help? What can I do? Right? Like everybody
Yeah.
just jumping in where needed and not worrying about the fact that, hey, that's a very fancy CIO at a very large company who's like helping me put worksheets on a table for a workshop kind of thing.
Yeah. You want to be approachable. I think
Yeah.
that's a great lesson.
Yeah.
For sure. All right. I want to move into some rapid fire questions.
Okay.
Okay. We call these the top tier questions.
How very on brand.
And yeah, well, we try to keep, we love our teas here. We keep them on brand
I like
for
it.
sure. All right. So, first one, if you had a walk up song, what would it be?
I think at this point in my life, it would be Survivor by Destiny's Child.
Wow.
And, it's kind of fun.
I'm gonna make. I love it.
I will not sing. I will not do that to the people. Dance, yes. Sing, no.
That was me. Sorry. Are you an early bird or a night owl?
Night owl, hands down.
Yeah.
I've had to wake up at 5:30 every day this week, and it makes me want to
Yeah.
curl up in a ball and
Yeah,
die.
me too.
I was born at night. I'm meant for the nighttime. My brain works better, and I'm just morning does not.
Same.
Yeah, no,
Same.
it's rough.
It is. The fog.
It is, and so much of what we do, we just have to do it. It's just not.
Yep.
I don't. It's not when I'm at my best.
Yeah, me neither. I'm mid morning to mid afternoon, and then later at night when
Yeah.
you know.
Well, research is showing that between 2 and 4 is when people are the least productive and
Really?
effective. It's when most car wrecks happen, most
Wow.
mistakes happen. So that makes sense that you kind of like have that stride and then
Yeah.
need a little break and then
Yeah.
get back. Yeah.
Yeah, it really is. So clearly, I fall into the
Yeah.
the data, right?
My team laughs. We're like, we're not going to do any meetings between 2 and 4 now. I was like, that's not what I meant.
Yeah, I have 2:30s pretty much every day. Right. Okay. Very controversial question here: window seat or aisle seat?
Aisle seat.
Always aisle.
I need the freedom of movement without anybody
Same.
being in my way.
Same. What instantly earns your trust in someone?
Someone that does what they say they're going to do.
I love it.
Like if you say you're going to do it, and be consistent. That's such a confidence builder with me. Like
Yeah.
I will instantly think the world of you.
Do what you say you're going to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love it. What's one thing you always make time for, no matter how busy life gets?
My son.
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. You got to have a why.
Yeah.
I have mine.
Yeah.
My 3 at home, my 2
Yeah.
kids, and my wife, the dog too. But good to have a why. And
It is. And then that's not to say that I can always drop everything and be everywhere, right? Like it's a
Yeah.
balance. And so I think, the balance is I have very purposely chosen roles in the past. He's 15. So in the
Mhm.
past 15 years, as much as I can, where I have the ability to be at the baseball games, to be at the school things, to be able to like some of the carpool, all that kind of stuff. It's been important. But I think too, this is also a child as a toddler who sat in board meetings on volunteer boards that I ran
Wow.
and things I was doing. And in fact, when he was about 4, he had been in so many volunteer experiences with me and so many board meetings and things that I did that at one point he looked at me and he was like, "Mom, do women run everything?" Because his experience was seeing me in all these rooms full of women
Yes,
getting
they
stuff done.
do,
And I was like,
son.
yeah, no, that would be great. But yeah, so I mean, making time for him, but not to the point that like you're not still, I still think it's important. And I think women have a lot of guilt about the balance of the work and the parenting and the
They
thing.
do.
And I just want to say, like, I also think it's impactful for your children to see you
Mhm.
do what you do.
Yeah, it's so funny you say that. I see that in my wife sometimes, her trying to juggle everything, the demand that is put on mothers in marriages with children. But we always just talk about just be present.
Yeah.
Because that time that they're living with us it's short.
It is, it goes
And
fast.
so just being present is something that we've worked on, and very grateful to have flexibility here at Tier 4 Group to be present in my children's life, and love to hear that. Heather, one of the things I wanted to talk about before we close out is the rate at which we are losing women in mid-career in technology. You alluded to it a little bit earlier in the conversation, but I think it's very important for us to discuss this before we close out because it's part of the mission, vision, and values of women in technology. And so, can you share a little bit about what you're seeing right now in the current market?
Absolutely. And the reason it's baked into our strategic plan and with that also really informed our program planning is because before we did our strategy, we looked at a lot of reports about women in the workforce, a lot of reports about workforce in general, the technology sector, and what the data told us really helped us decide what we were going to do and how we're going to do it. And what the data told us was that the numbers were getting worse, not better for mid-career women in particular. And I think none of us really had heard the statistic that by the age of 35, nearly 50% of women in technology and technology adjacent roles were leaving. And that was shocking to us.
Yeah,
And so we had to take a moment
absolutely.
of nobody's talking about this. It does explain why everybody's like, I don't have enough people for my leadership pipeline. It's like, oh, well, because you lost them years ago and may or may not have even noticed. And so it really that became an aha moment for me. And so it's how I've driven wit in the past few years and how I look at the next few years. Because if you think about it, it doesn't matter what we do to get girls interested in STEM and tech careers if they're going to hit a cliff before they even kind of get through with their career journey. And we can't say we need more women leaders if we're not letting them kind of get through the pipeline to even have that moment. So what we did was say we have to double and triple down on how we're serving women at mid-career. So we really shifted our program to make sure we're doing that. And everything, every WIT forum, every technology uncorked, every program that we do, the topic, the conversation, and the collateral that goes with it is based on what the data is telling us is the problem and what the solutions are. So we're really diving deep into that. And I think too, if I think about some people may really care about that and some might not. They might think, oh, I mean, I'm not really, my workforce is what it is, right? But I would say if you take the gender out of it, if you run an organization, if you're a leader in the tech community, you want to have the best organization you can have. You want to have the most profit you can have. You want to have the best product you can have, service, results, whatever the case is. You're only going to have that if you have unleashed the full talent of your full workforce. So if you say, hello, leader, is there any reason you wouldn't want to unleash the full talent of your full workforce, which is, by the way, going to make the organization more money and data says you'll be more profitable? Would you like to not do that? Like nobody's going to say, "Oh no, let's do the opposite of all those things." So when you're dismantling systems that support your whole workforce, you're actually going contrary to what makes your business successful. And so for me, yes, I care about women in tech and I come at it from a gender equity lens. But at the end of the day, if we all decide we care about this and we just want to have the most talented, most innovative, best workforce we can have across all industries, that requires everybody to look and think, what do I need to do to help everybody be successful? And if we do that, our communities thrive, our ecosystem around business thrives, our economy thrives.
Yeah.
And by the way, I'm out of a job and I'll be perfectly happy. But, it's at the end of the day, all of this, there's a business case to it that really helps everybody.
Yeah, it's so crazy to think about when we can look at the statistics when women entered the workforce. And then now the modern statistics that talk about declining birth rates and what the workforce is going to look like and how we're going to add to that. And when we're losing 50% of women in tech and tech adjacent that are working in technology roles, it's really scary about what the talent pipelines look like for future state. And as a recruiter and a staffing firm, that's very scary data to us.
But here's what I'll tell you. All the problems that we uncover in the data, they all have solutions, and those
Right.
solutions are very manageable.
Yeah.
And we know what they are, and we know how to help people implement them, and we know they're successful. So there's no reason for us to just see it and be scared of it. There are solutions we can do today that make it work. And so, my call to action for everybody is regardless of where you come from on this issue, we can build a coalition that everybody benefits and we solve those issues that you just brought up.
Yeah, and I think if I were to put a bow on it, the importance of sponsorship.
Right.
To me, that's probably where you begin and helping drive that mindset shift of the importance of sponsorship versus mentorship.
Yeah.
Other last question. If someone listening today is trying to reach their own next tier, what would you tell them?
I would tell them to be specific about what that means to them,
Mm,
about what they want, what they bring, how they're gonna get there, at least to the best of their knowledge, but they've gotta be able to articulate that because we talked about mentorship and sponsorship, and if people wanna help you, you can't just wait for somebody to hand you, "Here's the guide to the next step of your career. This is how you're gonna do it." You have to take ownership of that.
mhm,
You have to have clarity around it. You have to build your story, and you have to have a plan, and when you have that plan and you can clearly articulate it, then you can build momentum
mhm.
with your authentic relationships that you've built, the people that wanna help you. Because how many times have somebody said, "Hey, let me know what you need. I'd love to be" like, we all wanna help people,
Right,
but we can't be mind readers,
right.
and we can't do it for them. So if you can articulate that and be clear about what you need and where you wanna go,
Yeah.
then your community will help you get there.
Yeah, it's funny. As you were saying that, I thought about you got to get off the couch.
Yeah, nobody's gonna walk up and go, "Hey, this is what you should really do next, and let's just" like, you've gotta be in the mix.
Right.
You've gotta be in the mix, and I mentioned authentic relationships, and I use that phrase very intentionally. I think people make the mistake of mixing up the idea of networking with authentic relationship building, and to me, my career is really I've been successful, whether it's in corporate and business development or in nonprofit,
Yeah.
because I have intentionally built authentic relationships that are not transactional.
Yeah.
So I am as willing to help somebody else as they are willing to help me. And building those relationships long before you need them and not because you think you're going to need somebody. I approach everything from how can I help you as a starting point? And then that just builds into some wonderful things. So I think it's so important to have that in your back pocket.
Yeah, I think of networking as like speed dating,
Right.
but what you're
So
talking about
transactional and check a
is
box
not.
and
It's
no.
it's rapport, commonality, trust, right? Those
Right.
things that we do, authenticity. Well, look, I always enjoy when we get to talk. There's a picture of us from an event that we had, Paddle Battle, where we were able to raise a lot of money for women in technology. And there's a photo of you and I having a conversation, and we are both laughing hysterically. It just, honestly, that image is exactly what I think of you every
Yeah.
time I get to interact and speak with you. You're just a ball of energy. Your energy is infectious. Your smile and your laugh are infectious, and you're in the right seat, and you're doing amazing work for the community, for women. And like I said, as an ally and as a girl dad, I'm in awe. And it's just been such a privilege for me to get down, to sit down with you today and have this talk. Really greatly appreciate you donating your time to us and letting me just grill you.
This was fun. This
Question.
could have been so much worse. Like, this was fun. Let me talk about myself a little more,
Yeah.
right? Like, no, so and part of this too is, we're so appreciative of partners like Tier 4 that don't just put their name on something as a rubber stamp, but actually, like, are passionate about the mission.
Yeah.
It put not just your funding behind it, but your volunteerism behind
Yeah.
it and serving in the ways that you do. And I think the biggest thing that you can do as an ally is continue to be vocal.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, you know what? We've got microphones
that's
and we
right.
have a platform, and
Perfect.
we're going to continue to talk loudly, even for the folks in the back of the room, about these issues that are going on. And we're going to continue to be allies and advocates. So thank you so much for those kind words. Just really, really appreciate it. And I wanted to close out today by saying this: don't wait for permission or the perfect moment to make your next move. It's about making intentional decisions, standing behind your wins, and using your leadership and influence to lift others as you go. Success isn't accidental, it's uncommon, and it's on purpose.
Love it.
Thanks, Heather.